It's the Free Roam podcast. How are you,
Yes.
Mr. Jor?
Hello. Yeah, great. It's a fun week in gaming. I feel it's a week where we can have some interesting discussions. Of course, last week we weren't there at the funeral of Concord. We skipped it.
It was too much.
It feels like a month ago that Concord shut down. Don't you feel like that?
Yeah, weirdly, like gaming
feels
right now
long.
feels both like things are taking forever and then also that they're
Yeah.
flying by. Like it's crazy to me that we're halfway through the generation, but also that it's like been just a few weeks since Concord launched, and it feels like that's forever ago. And I don't know, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we saw during that PS5 Pro presentation. Of course, we're gonna talk about it here. That they showed like half or more than half of those games were PS4 games. That they were like, look, more trees.
Yeah,
Wow.
if you zoom in really close, you can see a difference.
Oh my god.
Yeah, we're at a weird spot, specifically with Sony, because they just don't. Either they don't have anything to show, or they're waiting till there's a state of play or a showcase to reveal it. So, like you said, they're just like trying to sell you on a big piece of hardware with 4 or 5-year-old games, and it's just weird.
You would think that the people that are in the market for a hardware like that already played those games, because you're marketing this to the most like hardcore PlayStation fans. But of course we have some other. I think it will be interesting to kind of go over the sort of Ubisoft stock situation. I saw you made like a separate video on your live channel, of course, already, because that's where we're live every Wednesday, at least when our schedules allow it. Because last week, did you already tell the people where you work? Are you allowed? You can say it, right?
Yeah, I'm allowed to say I've played a lot of Dragon Age: The Veilguard. I can't say anything more than that.
Okay.
Met some wonderful people there. Met Dennis there. Met
Nice.
Luality, Wolfheart, JV was there.
Nice.
Lots of people. So it was a really good time. Some amazing people. And I will have lots to say about that game on the 19th when we are allowed to publish our impressions. But that did kind of throw us for a loop because it was in the middle of the week and we weren't able to do the podcast. But we're here now and we're going to talk about all sorts of ooey gooey goodness, because you're right, there is stuff going on with Ubisoft, the stock price in general. There's calls for them to take the company private because a bunch of investors basically want out, and that's the only way. I mean, I think there is going to be, if there isn't right now, there probably is a pretty big internal push behind the scenes for them to sell. But I don't think that'll happen for reasons we'll talk about. But it's a very interesting time for Ubisoft, especially.
Yeah.
We've also gotten other looks in the last day or so. Like, for example, we got a pretty hefty look at Crimson Desert just this morning.
Yeah, 50 minutes of new gameplay, IGN. Damn.
Yep. Extended preview discussions too, where they described it and talked about the hands-off demo that they saw. So there's stuff to talk about there. There's some gears
you wanna
turning.
talk about that? I mean, I've just skimmed through it. I said it on Twitter already. Like, I think that's gonna be. I don't think it will be as popular as Wukong, but yeah, I do think it will be that sort of. I mean, people are now going to pay more attention to these types of games because this year has been the year of the surprise hits with Palworld, of course, at the start, Helldivers, The First Descendant, you can count that kind of as well. And then, of course, Wukong, that got some people surprisingly off guard. I think we're now like more aware of these games, and I do think Crimson Desert, if it's launching early next year, it's gonna be one of the bigger games if it's hits. But them like releasing 50 minutes of gameplay is a good sign, right? And at Gamescom, everyone who was there could play it. Last year, that was for Wukong the same as well. So yeah, that shows that they are confident, and we know with Black Desert. I think the game for Black Desert Online was always really good. It was mostly the monetization that, didn't wasn't that great for according to many people. I never tried it for that reason, but a like single player open world without any of those strings attached, I think could be very, very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, if we shift just right into that, I mean, Crimson Desert's one of those games where the primary concern people have is that it looks too good to be true. And it's a great problem to have if you can deliver. And the fact that they're being so transparent about it is very reassuring, to me at least. I mean, we won't know ultimately until we play the game ourselves or review it, or reviewers post their reviews of it. But with games in years past that looked too good to be true and ended up being too good to be true, usually there's a couple common threads. It's like they don't want to give it to people to preview early. There's no extended gameplay. Like, think of No Man's Sky. We talked about this on stream earlier. Think of No Man's Sky back in 2016. A lot of people said this game sounds too good to be true. And you notice there were no extended gameplay sessions. They weren't taking that to Gamescom and letting thousands of people try it. Yep, very small team. They had PlayStation money behind them, which was promising, but all of the demos and stuff that they did at press conferences were the same planets over and over and over again. Like, there were red flags to be seen if you were looking at it skeptically and critically. With Crimson Desert, they're showing the good and the bad. In the IGN preview, they talk about how the writing and the story seems a little convoluted and at times just really tough to follow, but maybe it ties in later, maybe it gets better. But then they show some really good stuff too. And whenever a preview features some really good stuff and maybe some less good stuff, to me that's more confidence inspiring, because it shows that they're willing to show you just what the game is, and they're not trying to hide all the bad stuff. Like, they'll just show you what it's like. It's why I appreciate gameplay demos, for example, where you see the game as it is, good and bad, rough edges and all. So I think that game is looking more and more promising.
Yeah, it's mostly what I'm seeing is that people are like kind of scared for the console performance, and I totally get that as well, because it seems to be very ambitious, and also a lot of things happening in the world, a lot of destruction. You can like fly real high and then go down like sort of battle royale style. So we will see how that all works, like fly around with a huge dragon. Sure, a like high-end PC can handle that, but what about the Series S or a regular PS5? So we will have to wait and see. Like, is it gonna be 30 FPS? That would of course suck for people as well. So still a lot of like question marks, but I do think, and like they show confidence. It's like great that, like, this could have totally been a game that we saw last year at Gamescom with that cool like 3-minute trailer and then never heard of it again. Like that was totally like in the cards, because that trailer looked insane. But them finally going to Gamescom, letting everyone play like boss battles against 4 bosses. Yeah, I think they at least got something in terms of combat. And what we've seen with all the games that I mentioned about the like surprise hits, they all did not have a good story either.
Yeah.
So of course, for like an open world RPG where maybe the narrative is more at the forefront, that will hurt the experience. But if you then can like martial arts style kick and sword fight with all these enemies, and it just feels really good to play, I do think people would not mind it as much.
Yeah, and I mean, the comparison that IGN makes is that they say it feels like a melding of Zelda, like Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild. It's very vertical. There's lots of different systems at play at any given moment. The world's massive, all that. But it feels like a melding of that and Assassin's Creed in terms of its structure and layout as an adventure game in the open world, which, some people cringe when they hear that. Other people are like, okay, so lots of content. Maybe it's not the most like emotional content, but at least there's a lot there. And one thing they also point out is that there's a lot of quests that overlap. So, you speak to a guy in the city and he talks about how they've had raids happen where the guys that are doing it are using some sort of red smoke in combat. And so watch out for the red smoke. And then in a different quest, he comes across a bandit camp of goblins who are using like these little grenade looking things that let out a red smoke. And so you realize those are connected. And by defeating that group of goblins, you actually take care of both quests at the same time, because that group was doing both things. And we're messing with both.
That's cool. Yeah, that's always awesome. And I had that when playing a Wukong as well, where I'm getting sold on one part with like the trailers and stuff, like the cool boss fights and just the Chinese mythology, like seeing that in like AAA style, like that game looks incredible. But then to play the game and notice, whoa, there are a ton of secret areas, optional bosses. Whoa, what are they doing here with this cinematic moment? Like, that's cool to already go in with high expectations and then still have certain things that they did not really like tease pre-launch to still get blown away by stuff like that as well. So that sounds promising. That is cool. That's cool.
Yeah, and I think it strikes me as a game that honestly probably is not going to be very smooth on console. It already seems like they're relying a lot on things like upscalers to hit decent frame rates. So I don't expect it to run that great on the console side of things. But if you have the hardware to run it, like a PlayStation 5 Pro, and you can really crank it, I think it looks like it's going to be a beautiful game in many ways, and probably one that definitely prioritizes gameplay over the story. And for some people that will be frustrating, but for others, they're like, cool, I can kind of turn my brain off to that. I don't have to think about it that hard. So I'm thoroughly interested, and the more I see of this game, the more intrigued I become, because it seems like they're actually, like, there is a game here. It's not perhaps too good to be true like we were worried about initially. It seems like there actually is something here. And I mean, I hope that it pops off, because not only do I want good games, but I want more competition in this space of the big, like, open world adventure games. And the more competition there is, and the more developers are in this space, the better these games will be, because Ubisoft needs to up their game, EA needs to up their game, Take-Two has to up their game, because there's new players in town. So I really hope this pops off, and it looks really promising from what I've seen.
I mean, it is like what we learned this year, not to sound like a broken record, but like one thing we really saw is that new experiences, even if they are not of the highest graphical quality, like Concord showed that you can, if you make a good game, that's not good enough anymore. You really have to give something new that I can't find elsewhere. Otherwise, I will just play the game that I already have, or that I've like played for many years. And this, once again, is that. It's a new IP. Sure, it has many elements that we've seen in other games, but it's still it has a very distinct look. It seems to mesh like very fighting like action focused boss fights in a open world RPG, where normally the gameplay is like Witcher 3, for example. The gameplay is not like the best part of that game, but here it really seems to take the upper hand and really be the focus. And that is awesome to have that as well in a world that you can still explore. And like, I love that with new IPs. You don't know what you're gonna get. Like, you don't know what you will find when you go there. And at one point with certain games, if you've played that series before or something, or in the Star Wars universe, you gotta know what you can expect when you like go around in Outlaw.
It's that sense of like wonder that I feel has been so absent this generation so far. Because I mean, like you're saying, you know what you're getting with a Star Wars game. You play Elden Ring's DLC, it's going to be good, but it's going to be more Elden Ring, and that's why you're excited for it. But there's not that sense of like the first time you booted up Horizon back in 2017, and you're like just in amazement of what could be around the next corner, or what's inside these weird, like, ancient old technology sites where it seems like they're making these machines. Like, what is going on? That sense of wonder is something that's just been lost with all of these games that are either just remakes, they're remasters, or they're just straight sequels that are good, but they just are not as exciting as a new IP that's just blowing your brain. Like the original announcement of like God of War 2018. The reason why people, like, I just saw a highlight reel of it recently where they reveal it and Kratos walks out from the shadows and people are like shaking. They're so excited and blown away at this new direction because it was just wonder and curiosity as to where this was going to go. And I feel like in the pursuit of chasing safer bets with like a Spider-Man 2, for example, yeah, it's going to perform well, but it's going to be more Spider-Man. Like, we know what that game is, and it's just not as thrilling as what we got last time around in the last generation. And I hope that we start to get some more of these types of experiences that are just exciting and different and new. Astrobot is very good, Just Life, you're right. But even Astrobot is like, the whole joke is that Astro's Playroom is just the demo for Astrobot, because they took the teaser or the Playroom free included game and just expanded it into its own game, which is why it's so good, because that little cut was very, very good. But we also know exactly what you're getting. If you've played Astro's Playroom, just imagine a full game of all that, and that's why people are excited, because it's really good. But even that, like, that was the sense of wonder and amazement we felt back in 2020 when the console launched and we played Astrobot for the first time. That's that feeling that I feel is really absent, especially this year. And I hope we get more and more games that really crank it and show us that again. That's my hope.
Yeah. I mean, nothing wrong with sequels, of course, and I'm happy that these games get like supported or like get a new one. Especially games like Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2, and I want to see where Aloy's journey ends, all that sort of stuff. But I do think companies are paying attention to the hits that were this year, and there was no 2. Yeah, apart from Helldivers, but it was a different game.
Yeah,
Like,
I think effectively, it wasn't top down anymore. I think effectively that was like a brand new thing.
Exactly. It was still like a brand new experience, even if it was called Helldivers 2. And I do think companies are going to look at that, but I think the problem where because what we heard, Black Myth Wukong cost 80 million to make. Like, that's crazy. And it like sold 18 million copies in 2 weeks. Like, they made $700 million, I think, something like that already. And that's like where these bigger, more ancient publishers are kind of, like, if they want to do a new IP, they have to invest way more, because that's kind of what people expect from them. And that's kind of how they know how to make games. Like, Ubisoft has so many developers. If they are going to make a new IP, it's immediately going to be a way more scary proposition, because they have like way more wheels turning already that machine cannot stop. And that's, I think, where all these other publishers or all these other developers are able to Phantom Blade Zero, like another like smaller team suddenly coming up. That game is, if it's as good as what I played, is gonna sell really, really good as well. Like, so it's like it's hard for them. Like, they want to focus on these sequels because that's a safer bet on paper. But now they're seeing, okay, all these new ideas are doing very well. It will be interesting to see how they navigate that. And I do think Sony right now, even if and I think we can then segue to the PS5 Pro, because that was kind of what we were missing, right? This is what a new game looks like, not that old game you've already played 4 years ago. Like, I do think with Cory Barlog at Santa Monica finally doing a new IP, like after God of War 2018, he was kind of hands-off with Ragnarok. He's been like thinking about something. He's been working on something brand new. Neil Druckmann as well. Like, I hope that these games deliver what you've been talking about. That like that feeling when we played The Last of Us for the first time, where we're like, what the heck? And when you saw like a new clicker or whatever, or like the clicker for the first time, that animation where you get caught by Joel gets killed by the click. I was like, what? Like, you want to have those moments again, and that's really what this generation sadly has been missing. But I have hope that we will still get it. And in the meantime, we got all these new developers pop up. Pearl Abyss, I mean, in the console space, just not very known. Like Stellar Blade, of course, this year as well. Like, a lot of these smaller studios are bringing the sort of new experiences while we wait for the titans, the big AAA developers, to hopefully bring some new ideas as well.
No, I think the fact that Black Myth was comparatively very cheap, I think it reveals once more an issue within Western game development, which is that budgets are out of control and costs are out of control. And there's some debate as to why specifically that is, or why that could be. You know, some people think, oh, it's just because, you know, they're putting all these studios in urban centers. Like, you know, we flew out for Dragon Age to San Francisco. San Francisco is one of the most expensive cities in America to live. And that's where EA makes all these games, these big games. I don't know if that's where BioWare specifically is from, but that's where a lot of their teams are built around. And so just the cost of living is so high, they have to pay their employees way more than if they had that talent in like the outskirts of Fort Worth, Texas, for example. So I think there's clearly some issue with how these games are being budgeted and how high the production costs are. And, you know, certainly in Japan and in China, and I don't know about Korea specifically, but at least in Japan and China, the average salaries and wages for game developers are significantly lower than they are in places like Montreal or San Fran or other places. And that's part of the reason. I mean, we looked at it before. People were saying, oh, Elden Ring is so pro-consumer and everything. And it's like, yes, in many ways, but also they pay their employees like what would be considered where I live, minimum wage. Like fast food workers or workers at the Buc-ee's gas station, they make way more than a software engineer at From Software makes working on Elden Ring. And that's part of the reason that they can do things the way that they do. But I think that it's very important to remember that those labor costs are way lower, and that helps them improve profitability and greenlight projects like Black Myth Wukong, whereas that project would probably cost $200 to $300 million to make for Sony, which makes it tough.
Yeah, exactly. But I am sure they are looking at it. Like what I think they might take away from Wukong and these other games like Helldivers and stuff, like it's gameplay first mostly. And I think where, for example, a Spider-Man 2, I mean, Spider-Man 2 is maybe not the best example because you kind of expect that movie motion capture experience. But that game went way over budget because they had to redo some things, and like they spent a lot of time in these motion capture studios. And sure, Black Myth Wukong had that as well, but that game has like maybe 20 minutes of cutscenes or something, maybe a bit more, but it's like these Naughty Dog games or like God of War, and they have like way more of that. So maybe, and does a Ubisoft game like really need a lot of that? Maybe they think so, but so maybe they're looking at, okay, maybe we can be more gameplay first and really put more resources there instead of what has been traditionally expected from a AAA game from us. So yeah, that's maybe interesting, and they can take away from that. And of course, like what you said, like that's where Concord's budget, of course, also came from. Like they're from Washington, Firewalk Studios. That's insane. They've been working on that for, of course, they started the studio in 2018. So 8 years was like thrown around. I think maybe some people thought of it and then they started working on it later. Then Sony came, of course, in. But yeah, that like giving those people salary every month or every year for that game easily was already 100 million. And then Sony bought it, and then
that's why when people ask me, they're like, Luke, you've got ideas for games, why don't you just make your own studio? I was like, unless people are willing to work for free. Like I do pretty well for myself. I do nowhere near good enough to pay for like 10 15 people's salaries for 2-3 years until you have a slice to take to a publisher to get your money back, hopefully, if they greenlight it. You know, it is extremely expensive in the States specifically. And that's because of cost of living. That's because of all this stuff. Europe is extremely expensive too. But I see some people that are like, why don't they just move the studios? Just move Naughty Dog or something to a cheaper place to make games. And I think the key is you can't, like, it's all about talent at the end of the day. You know, like if the talent wants to live in San Fran, and they're used to living in San Fran and getting paid enough to live in San Fran, they're going to stay there. And if the studio is moving, some of them or even a lot of them will move, but you'll lose some talent along the way. Like, it's just not that simple. And, you know, I think it was Bethesda Game Studios made a move. You know, they were in Rockville and, you know, they moved to different places. They moved studios back like maybe 10, 15 years ago, I think it was. But it's pretty rare for a studio to pick up and move significantly to another spot. It's more common for a company to just open up a studio in a cheaper place and have them help. Ubisoft does that, where Ubisoft has like Ubisoft Singapore, and then they have this team over here and this team in Malaysia, and they all work on stuff together. And the cost of the team in France is certainly a lot higher than the cost of the team in Malaysia, but that's, you know, they specialize in different ways. So yeah. I think it's just, there has to be some sort of reckoning with these budgets, because finding out that, was it Spider-Man cost 200 or 300 million?
I think 200, and Spider-Man 3 was expected to be 300 if they continued like that.
Ugh. Like, it is so crazy expensive.
Oh no, 315, and Spider-Man 3 was gonna be 350 probably.
God damn it. It's like, you start to wonder, how are you even spending that money for like a 12 to 15 hour game? Like, how is it that expensive to make that game?
I don't know.
Like, it's a fine game, certainly, even a great game. But I don't know how you run up a bill of $300 million on that.
But that is also what from the Insomniac leak kind of came out, where people inside Sony were like, okay, so Spider-Man 2 is like $200 million more than Spider-Man 1. If we like survey everyone who finished Spider-Man 2 and ask, did you notice a like triple the quality increase compared to Spider-Man 1? They would probably be like, no, it was like a fun game. I might like the first one more because blah, blah, blah. And okay, so why are we spending 200 million more on this sequel that will end up selling less than Spider-Man 1 as well? Which is crazy.
Yeah. It's why, like, it's also been complicated when people will ask about like unionizing in the game development industry, because of course employees don't want to risk losing their job even if they have a successful game like a Tango Gameworks, for example. So there's discussions of unionization with game devs where they basically collectively bargain to big corporations to get paid more, to have more protections, this and that, which obviously we all would love for artists and for the people making these games to be secured in their jobs and to make more money and all that. We would all love for that to be the case. But you also have to remember that, like, if budgets are this high now without unions collectively bargaining for higher wages, how out of control will budgets get if people start getting paid like 20, 30% more? Like, at somewhere in the equation, as far as I can tell, there is some amount of waste. And I don't know if it's just inefficiencies where games are taking way longer to make unnecessarily so, and it's just a matter of production or something that's causing games to take longer and therefore cost more. I don't know if it's just a reality, but then again, we see games like Black Myth or games like Crimson Desert who come in from outside studios and pop off and were comparatively very, very cheap. And so you're just like, well, then what is the problem? And I think you're right, Jimmy, in YouTube chat. This is where AI comes in. It's exactly why these companies are so excited about AI, because the idea of being able to go and have AI basically cut the workforce by 20%, say, that is very alluring. They're like, we could shave the budget by 20% by just having ChatGPT write some quest dialogue or go and generate concept art so we don't need to pay a concept artist. Like, hell yeah, let's do that. Of course the executives are excited by that. So it's a very interesting time in the industry, specifically in Western markets, because it seems like Eastern markets, I would argue, probably because wages are lower, are not burdened by these same difficulties.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
Talking about a burden. What?
Let's do some super chats first. Because,
do we have that? I'll refresh. Okay, hold on.
That's not a burden, by the way. We appreciate that.
Oh yeah, to be clear.
Yeah, because last week or last time we kind of went late on them, so we want to appreciate everyone, of course, who supports the show. So thanks for that.
Mm-hmm. Zoob. Thank you for the super chat. Niche high roller enthusiast product has a niche high roller enthusiast price. Shocker. Oh, we're going to talk about the PS5 Pro, my friend. Don't you worry. Because you're right. It is a niche high roller enthusiast product with a price to match. I think specifically what people are bothered about is the pitch, for one. I just don't think it was a compelling pitch. And two, I think it is the way that they framed it and the things that are missing. It is literally a pro product that has less features included in the box than the original product it's meant to be an upgrade for.
And some of the for me, like I have to pay $800 for it, and it, like, if you calculate it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, the euro versus USD, yeah.
And the UK is even crazier. So they are really, once again, and that's where, because like in Europe they're dominant. Like they are the number one console. So yeah, like Xbox is almost like non-existent here. And in the US, Microsoft still has a presence. So I think, and we also saw that when they raised the price from the regular PS5, it was only in Europe and I think in the UK as well, to like 50 more. And in the US not, because they still have that competition going. So that's probably why. But that really sucks because it's like the euro is like worth more than the dollar. And I still pay €100 more, or like $180 if you like calculate it, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. I've tried to look at it. I saw a financial analyst who is not like directly in the games industry, but he just covers Sony as one of his like tech stocks. And he gave a breakdown on it, and he was trying to figure out the pricing justification. And there's sort of like a hand waving thing that's happening where people are saying, well, it's because the US dollar versus the euro versus the pound sterling, all these currencies are up in the air and they're weaker because of inflation. That's why. But he broke it down and he's like, even with inflationary pressures accounted for, they are just charging like $150, $200 US effectively more in Europe and the UK, and a good bit more in other countries like Brazil and Australia, because they can. And it seems like it's pretty much because they know they can get away with it. They know that there's no competition and you're going to pay it and you're going to like it, which is even scummier than anything else. But again, we'll talk about it. Don't worry. Diego, thank you for the $5 super chat. The PS5 Pro doesn't make sense until you take into account the trade-in program that they have. $350 for the Pro after you send your PS5 doesn't sound bad. That is an interesting takeaway if we pull up the trade-in program. I'll pull that up and we can look at that as part of our discussion, because I agree that hasn't really been talked about. Okay. And then Samaya, thank you for the super chat.
Still sending in your disk drive though. You're not getting that back.
True.
We will talk about it.
That's true. Okay, and then Samaya, after Far Cry with blue people and Assassin's Creed with stormtroopers, what do you think is next for Ubisoft Massive? The Division with Dragon Ball?
If they want to go bankrupt, they should probably do that. They're gonna do Division 3. And maybe they have Dragon Ball skins. Like, at one point, they will do crazy cross promotions. But yeah, again, like the stock... we will find out if the stock can go even lower if they add like Dragon Ball to their games, but one day maybe.
Oh baby, oh man, yeah. Do you want to talk about Ubisoft next, or do you want to get into the PS5 Pro?
Let's get into the PS5 because that's the title of the video, and we've been teasing it already a bit. So let's do that, and then talk about what's happening with Ubisoft.
Okay, let's do it. So. Do you want to kick this off? Do you want to lead us in with this?
So of course, people probably are already up to date, but if not, Sony revealed their PlayStation 5, the PlayStation 5 Pro. We all knew it was coming. They did it through a YouTube video where Mark Cerny, kind of the lead architect on all the recent PlayStation hardware, was kind of talking about some features of the PS5. And the moment he started talking about the quality and or like the fidelity and the performance mode, I was getting excited because for me, going into this, that was always my hope, that they would combine the two, because we kind of, at the start of the generation, we kind of got a wrong expectation, because we were playing a lot of PS4 games that also were working on PS5, of course, but because they had to run on a very old 2013 hardware, they of course got the high resolution 60 FPS mode on PS5. But then the further we get into the generation, with in particular this year Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as a prime example, where that game looks incredible in like quality mode, but when you want to play in 60 FPS, when you switch it to performance mode, it's like a PS4 game. It looks really, really bad. It's like gray. The sharpness is completely gone. So I never really do that. I usually stay in performance mode and then don't touch it anymore. But for that game, I went back. When I was like at a new location, I was like, I need to see this in like high fidelity. So when they started talking about that during the PlayStation 5 Pro presentation, I was like, yes, they're gonna do it. They're gonna give us what we want. And that's like, I was kind of happy at that point when they were talking about it. And one of the examples they showed was The Last of Us Part 2, where they were like, yeah, this is the game running on PS5, of course. They had like a remastered version, I think, earlier this year. This is the game running on PS5 in fidelity mode. So it looks the best it can be. It's 30 FPS. But this is the PS5 Pro mode, because that's the thing with PS5 Pro. They will still have modes, but it will be a PS5 Pro mode. So yeah, it will kind of combine performance and fidelity. And that's what we saw. It looked as good as fidelity, but you were running in 60 FPS. So I was like, awesome, show me more. And then they showed what the performance mode looked like on PS5 and the performance mode on PS5 Pro. Now, why are we still doing that? And then they were really zooming into trees, and the pixels were a bit better on the right side of the on the PS5 Pro image. So that was kind of getting weird. This is all because of the AI technology they're using. The PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution is what they call it. It's, of course, the DLSS that we already see on PC. Yeah, and more advanced ray tracing is what they talked about. But that was kind of it. And the examples they showed were all, like, even when we were moving to the PS5 Pro section, so they started, like, kind of talking about the PS5, then we ended up in the PS5 Pro section, they were using Borderlands 3. They were using Ratchet & Clank. They were using all these like old games that every PlayStation fan has either touched or doesn't care about because they have been out for so long. So it was a really weird presentation where they were selling this high-end console with games that are already out, and most of them on PS4. So I hope they're looking better. So that was kind of the sad part about it. And then at the end, of course, bam, the price. $700, 800 euro, 700 pounds, and the yen was like crazy as well. I'm not sure what the calculation for that was, but I was shocked. I mean, I already predicted like 750 in Europe, but that was with a disc drive. So then to figure out that even 800 euro without a disc drive, like one of my takeaways was they somehow made the regular PS5 a more like they made that look like a better option at the end of this stream. So yeah, that was kind of my my thoughts through that whole presentation. And yeah, now that we're a day away, I got some new thoughts, but I'm curious to hear what you think, of course, as well.
Yeah. It's I think one of the more interesting takes that's come out of this is just everybody kind of having a moment to reflect on the most directly comparable example, which of course is the PlayStation 4 Pro, which I pulled mine out just for this.
Wow.
It is
what an
God
ugly
of
machine.
War.
What? Oh yeah, we have the cool God of War version.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, with the X. Yeah,
With
that's
the
the
X.
cool one.
Yeah, this is the cool one. But with this, the PS4 Pro was attempting to answer a specific question and a concern people had, which was back in 2016 when this launched. everybody was transitioning from 1080p TVs, so HD, to Ultra HD. They were all moving to 4K. If you went into the store, they were starting to get overrun with 4K TVs, and so if you wanted to upgrade your TV, it was going to be 4K. And the PS4 Slim maxed out at 1080p, so you were kind of stuck. And that's also why the Xbox One X was released, was because the Xbox One originally usually rendered at 900p. It didn't even hit 1080. So as a result, they released this hardware that was aiming to answer that question and to fix that for people. You could then play these same games that you know and love at 4K, checkerboarded up, to that resolution, which isn't the same as like DLSS or anything, but it got the job done and it did a pretty good job of it. And even some games could go to checkerboarded 4K and have better frame rates and play at 60 and stuff. So it was a product that clearly would immediately enhance your experience playing. The PS5 Pro, it's kind of hard to figure out what it is going to do for the vast majority of players. They say it will gain you fidelity level quality and 60 frames as opposed to performance level quality at 60 frames. But according to their own standards, PS5 Enhanced does not mandate 60 frames. You can be PS5 Enhanced and still run at 30. When they showed off Hogwarts Legacy in that video, it was 30 FPS footage. And they were framing it as like, well, look at the improved ray tracing in this third-party game. It's improved, but it's not even running at 60. So the standard for what enhanced for PS5 Pro means isn't very clear. It just says, well, technically it runs better. So then people are wondering, okay, well then if it's not consistently improved in some clear standard way, we just have to rely on the idea that it's broadly better. And even then, you see like the comparisons that they do show. And bear in mind, these are the cherry-picked examples when they're trying to convince you this is worth spending a lot of money on. And the best they could do is, like Jor said, 4 or 5-year-old games that, like, yeah, if you pause and you zoom in, you can see a difference between the two modes. And like, I guess, yeah, there is a difference. But it's real hard to determine whether or not this is worth the money when these are the specifically enhanced games. And even then you have to kind of try to spot the differences. And so like at the outset, the product, it just doesn't seem like the software is ready to take advantage of the new hardware. It seems like the PS5 Pro is a very powerful piece of hardware, but it doesn't seem like PlayStation has games ready to show why this hardware is necessary or how to use it. So I think that's the first thing is people are like, okay, I can spend $700 to play better looking versions of games I played 4 years ago, like during lockdown or whatever. And that just right off the beat is not a super convincing argument. Beyond that, the price point is a lot. I think we both expected it to be very expensive. And I've said for a long time, I think there is a spot for premium luxury consoles. I do think there are people out there who will spend, and I will see it because this is going to sell out almost certainly. I think there are people willing to spend $700, $800, $900 on a premium console. That was with the unspoken caveat that I thought was obvious, which is that it needs to be worth that price point. With this, it's really hard to figure out if it's actually worth it because it's $700, but $700 minus the physical disk drive and minus the stand, which they used to include in the box. So when you factor in the stuff that came with the PS5 at launch, you're talking about probably spending $800 to $810 in the US, more elsewhere, for a product that is an incremental improvement over the thing that launched 4 years ago. It gets really hard to figure out how this makes sense, how this price point was arrived at. And it just screams of Sony trying to put something out there to generate some revenue because they just don't have any games right now that are doing that. They were hoping Concord would release and pop off and start printing money like Helldivers did for a bit. But as of right now, it's obviously not doing that. So Sony needed something to save the end of their fiscal year through the holidays.
I don't know. I mean, looking at the PS4 Pro, that also did not sell a lot during the release quarter. I think this is more something you install and then always have the option later down the line, because we will have 4 more years probably of this generation, and especially next year with GTA. Like, that game is gonna be very important, or it will do nothing if you cannot really show if it's like really that much better. If they have maybe if it's like a 40 FPS mode or something, like that will already help. And then it's maybe smart to have it already out right now. But because if you would put it out next year with maybe you would be behind the launch of GTA. Like, you want to install it now, and then it's just there. And then at one point there will be games that probably use it, like a Ghost 2, and like all the Sony first party games will probably use it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I did hear people compare it like that, where they're like, it's not meant really to be sold like right now. I mean, we even got like a super chat at the end of my stream right before this, where somebody was saying you'll really be able to tell its power next year with GTA 6. And I agree. Next year, maybe it makes sense, but there's a difference between like the technical power and what they're charging for that, and it as a product. And I think the PlayStation 5 Pro as a product right now, I just don't understand it, because it's like you play PS4 games that look a little better for $800 effectively once you get everything.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's the crazy part. Like, the only new game that has been confirmed to support this system is Assassin's Creed Shadows.
Yeah, it's not the only upcoming game. It's the only upcoming game on the list.
The rest of it is like Alan Wake 2, Demon Souls, that launch game for the PS5.
Yeah.
They were really going to Blue Point. You got to give us, please. Give us
please anything. Yeah.
One interesting thing about that, and it's like a interesting theory I have. So let's look at the games they have confirmed right now, and let's focus on the third-party games. Alan Wake 2, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Demon Souls first party, Dragon's Dogma 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Gran Turismo 7, Hogwarts Legacy, Horizon Forbidden West, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Ratchet & Clank, The Crew Motorfest, The First Descendant, and The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. So if you remove the first-party games, that obviously Sony is mandating all those studios to make something. So then we have Alan Wake 2. They still got a DLC coming, so they're probably doing like a Ultimate Edition at some point. It makes sense for them to support this. Assassin's Creed Shadows, of course, a new game, will be supported for a long time. Dragon's Dogma 2. There have been rumors about DLC for that game, and I do think them having this patch ready makes that more likely. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, they of course will be able to use all the things they do use for this version for Part 3 as well, and they need the extra boost for that game. But yeah, there's no Final Fantasy 16 here. That's weird, because that game is over. They are not supporting that anymore. Then we have Hogwarts Legacy, Director's Cut. We know that is probably coming. That's probably why they are putting resources into that as well. So yeah, the Crew Motorfest, of course, will be supported. First Descendant is a live service game. So those are all for the third party. So that really, I think, shows that a Dragon's Dogma 2 DLC and that Hogwarts Legacy Director's Cut is incoming. Because, yeah, why of all the third party games are they showing up for this, right? So I thought that was an interesting wrinkle to this.
Yeah, and I think that makes perfect sense. It's pretty telling what they showed and what they didn't show. And I think a lot of people assumed that there would be Death Stranding 2. There was a picture a week or two ago of Kojima in his office, and he's playing Death Stranding 2. And then the thing that all the cables are plugged into is covered up with a black blanket. And people are like, oh, dev kit. Okay, he's prepping for the PS5 Pro. And then it's just not there. So maybe
it was a Switch 2.
Yeah, it was a Switch 2. Yeah. So a lot of people now are thinking, oh, the games will be shown at a state of play
next week
or whenever they happen to do it.
Yeah.
And, there were other rumors that they weren't going to show any first party stuff. I looked into those. I couldn't find any reliable source for that. It was a guy on Twitter with 200 followers. So I don't know if that ends up being true, but maybe we do see games there. I am still confused why they didn't just combine the announcements.
Because that is what happened with PS4 Pro. That's actually very interesting if you look at how they promoted that system. But That's just the weird thing with this generation, where Sony, for some reason, just doesn't want to talk. But I got a list here of all the games they showed during the PS4 Pro like reveal in September 2016, and then of course that console launched in November as well. They showed Spider-Man already. September, like they already had that trailer, of course. That game was already announced. That game came out 2 years later. For Honor, an early 2017 game. Mass Effect Andromeda. That also launched early 2017. Watch Dogs 2, which was like then out around that console. So that's kind of the Assassin's Creed Shadows. Days Gone, which would launch like 3 years later in 2019. Horizon Zero Dawn, which would then also launch a few months later. So we really saw, and that was, I think, what really helped, and maybe that's why they maybe did not do it here. We already saw these games before the PS4 Pro event. Like, we had many Horizon Zero Dawn trailers, and then they showed the PS4 Pro trailer. And of course, Guerrilla Games, like, maybe if you don't like their games, that's totally fine, but we can all agree they look stunning, and if they have new hardware, they will support it. So them showing that PS4 Pro trailer for Horizon Zero Dawn, while we had all the base PS4 shit before that, of course, really helped. So that would be weird if they showed Ghost 2 for the first time. I mean, of course, it's gonna look stunning. I think maybe then people would be like, okay, so it only works on PS5 Pro. How does it look on the base? Maybe they will create mixed messaging for that. So I think with their new strategy, because I see people in the chat all saying, so the Sony drought continues. It's just that their focus is like, we're announcing a game, 3 months later it's out. That's their new thing. And yeah, I don't know if that works if you're trying to sell a $700 console.
It's the approach from Sony this gen has just been confused and muddled as far as I can tell. And whether or not they have some grand plan or something, some grand scheme for the last half of this generation or not, remains to be seen. But if they do, the takeaway is that everybody's impression right now is that they are floating through the ocean without a rudder, and all their sails are torn because they thought that the live service games would be the sails to keep them going. And I've seen a lot of investors and analysts that are pretty ticked off at how the last year and a half, 2 years have been going. They got excited with Helldivers, but we have new hardware and no games to push the sale of it. Next year, we probably have Ghost and probably a Horizon multiplayer game.
And remember, Helldivers was nobody saw that coming, not even Sony. So if they did not even have that, the year would look pretty dire.
Yeah, they got pretty lucky with Helldivers.
Yeah.
It seems pretty clear that that was not part of some grand plan where all of these new live service games are going to be like Helldivers. They were pretty surprised by that. And instead,
there was no marketing.
Instead, they've been so excited about some of these live service games. I think their excitement should tell you a lot. Like, they got so excited over Concord that they bought the studio before they released the game. What they had done previously with like Bluepoint is they waited till they released a game that did well on their platform, and then they said, you did so good, we're going to buy you up. That's like the little quid pro quo. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. With Concord, they were so confident that game would pop off, they bought the studio before they even had announced their game. I don't know if it's like this weird Xbox derangement thing that they have where they're just so worried about Xbox swooping in and buying up the studio that they're like, we can't risk it, so just buy them now. You know, it seems like they had that attitude, but it should make you question their judgment that they thought that Concord was such a slam dunk, it would pop off for sure. And they're saying the same thing about Fair Games. There's reporting that internally people at Sony are very confident about Fair Games. You know what other game they were very confident about? Concord, which is why they bought the studio before they even announced the game. So anyway, there's all that. There's other things just to touch on real quick with this. Jeff Keighley, officially, it happened, guys. Jeff Keighley got community noted. Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
What he did was he posted this. He got teased a bit last night because people were saying he was trying too hard to defend this console. And what he did is he posted, here are the inflation adjusted prices for mainline PlayStation consoles since launch. Any outlines adjusted for inflation what each of these cost. PS1, $611 in 1995. PS2, effectively priced at $546 in 2000. PlayStation 3, effectively priced in modern dollars at $778 in 2006.
But that got a significant price cut because that price was too high. Like, that's very good information.
Yep. So, yeah, this comes back to actually prove the opposite of the point he was trying to make.
Yeah.
The PS4, $538 in 2013. PS4 Pro, $522 in 2016. So the last Pro came in cheaper in effective spending power than the product it was meant to be an upgrade for. The PS5 was $606 adjusted for modern dollars, and then the PS5 Pro at $699. Now, where he's been community noted is with readers adding context saying, quote, the PS5 Pro is comparable to the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition specifically, which, if you don't recall, was $100 less than the base PS5. It came in at $400 instead of $500, which is not included in this list. Didn't have the disc drive. PS5 Pro disc drive is $80, so it will be a total of $778.99 for it to be one-to-one with the rest of the PlayStation versions in this list. And I would also argue the PlayStation 5 had a stand, vertical mounted stand, included in the box as well at launch. So if you add that, they're charging $30 for that. You're at $810. So the PS5 Pro, when adjusted for inflation compared to everything else, to make it directly comparable, is not actually at this price point. The PS5 Slim would actually be like $500 adjusted for modern inflation levels. And the PS5 Pro would actually be closer to $800, which puts it even above the egregious pricing of the PlayStation 3 that significantly harmed Sony for an entire generation because it was so expensive compared to the 360. So
Yep.
the list of these things actually ended up kind of doing the opposite of, I think, what his goal was, which was to say, adjusted for inflation, this isn't that expensive, when in reality, it's actually, even adjusted for inflation, this is extremely expensive for what it is offering to do. And I think that that's an important thing to note.
Like, to round out this discussion, are you gonna get one?
I honestly, I thought this was just going to be a slam dunk, like, oh, I'll get it to talk about and review. We'll make videos on it. But, like, there's no games for me to really test with it. I'm hoping that we get a PlayStation, like, State of Play next week where they're like, oh, we're going to drop this remaster remake where it'll take advantage of it in November next to this, or just something like that. Then I could see justifying it mentally. But with this right now, I'm like, I would get it, and it will sit on my table over there collecting dust until sometime early next year, in which case I'll just wait till early next year. Maybe they'll do a bundle and I'll save money that way. So I don't really see the justification. And I did pull up, somebody in chat asked earlier, was it the super chat? Yeah, Diego asked about the PS5 Pro potentially makes sense with the trade-in program. I would say the trade-in program does not magically make things cheaper. It just means that you are basically selling something to get something else and put the money towards it. So it's not actually making the value any different. But I did pull it up on the PlayStation Direct website. They've partnered with a company called Back Market to do it, at least in the US. And in the US, when you go through here, I actually, you can just hit start now. It takes 2 seconds. If I say I have a Sony PS5 standard, I have one controller with it, what was in the box, and I have the only capacity available. Yes, it's functional. And then I go through to the next page. And even if I say it's flawless, so there are no problems at all, I see the offer, they will offer me $280. So in your super chat, you say $350 for the Pro after you do that. I guess if you...
Maybe if you sign it, like the Luke Stevens like signature.
There you go. Problem solved. So they're saying, like, and even with this, you ship your trade-in within 21 days, and then you receive your $280 payment after they've verified the quality and everything. Yeah, it's technically a trade-in. I think you get more for it, honestly, on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or something. GameStop, Louise is saying GameStop offers $350. That's great.
Good.
That's better. But again, I think it's just important to remember that that's not actually a discount, you're not saving money because you're giving up your PlayStation 5 you currently own. So it's not making it cheaper. You're just selling something. Like if I want to buy $100,000 car and I sell my car to make it cheaper, I didn't make it cheaper. I just sold something I had that was worth something, and then I'm spending that money to buy something else. It's not actually a discount.
Yeah.
It makes it easier to rationalize, but it doesn't actually make it cheaper. So I don't know, with all this, are you buying one? Where are you at? It enhances Forbidden West. They said it allows them to do new lighting.
I mean, I was like, in my mind, it already looked like this. So again, like I think right now they totally did not justify the price and what they showed. If I would buy it, and I think I will, because I think also, like, we are in an interesting position. Like you said, I want to review it or whatever. Also, if I record all the gameplay on that system and it runs in 60, looks better, that makes the videos better. I can write it off from my company, etc., etc. So there are like some upsides to it. But I'm not saying that anyone should get it. Again, I'm in a different position because I will use it for work. But I'm mostly right now getting it for the promise, and also for PS4 Pro that totally delivered. Like, I'm super happy that I was able to play The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, like God of War on that system, Horizon Zero Dawn, because like I already spent thousands of hours on my PS5. So maybe I'm right now internally trying to come up with a reason why this price is worth it. But
it is fair to point out we are in a very unique position where most people, they buy a product like this, they spend $800 when all is said and done to get everything, and then like that's it. You know, they've spent the money and they're hopefully going to get that amount of enjoyment out of it. For us, we're in a weird spot. We're like, if I buy this and make a video and it does pretty well, the video just paid for the PlayStation 5 Pro.
Exactly.
So it's not, you know, for me, it was like an afternoon of making the video and setting everything up and downloading and then playing and filming, and then my team edits it and we put it up. Like, for me, it's a day of work and it basically paid for itself. 99.999% of people are not in that position to be like a spoiled brat like me who can do that. But even for me, I'm having trouble justifying it because I don't like the idea of taking up a console that's most likely just going to sit and collect dust.
But you also mainly play on PC. I mainly play on PlayStation. I never really play PC games. So that's
true.
Of course, also a significant...
you know what? You've convinced me, Jor.
Difference.
You should buy it. You've convinced me.
To be fair, like I'm like, I don't want to. I mean, that's the crazy thing about it, or the sucky thing. Like, Sony knows they can get away with it. At least like 1 million people will buy it if they like do nothing. And this was nothing. They did nothing.
Yeah.
They had Mark Cerny record for one day, write a script, use old gameplay. They send out one media person to this New York office. CNET, I got to see it. They spent nothing on this.
Well, and talk about how low effort this was. CNET, which is for whatever reason the company they chose to partner on this big announcement. CNET was so incompetent with their coverage that their video showcasing the benefits of the PS5 Pro maxes out at 1080p 30 frames. It is just about the worst you could do to showcase a 4K 60 capable device. You are presenting that at quarter resolution and half the frames of all the footage.
He even said I was playing Gran Turismo at 8K.
Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. But like, I'm also really always interested in these new types of hardware. I like I don't know. I hope it's gonna be worth it, but I will tell you, if it's not, then I made the sacrifice. Damn, I
He's convinced
keep
himself.
coming up with
guys.
arguments.
He's done. Yeah.
Give me a moment. Give me a moment. No, but I will. I mean, I can talk about it here on the podcast. Oh my god, it's such
Yeah.
a good
See,
idea.
really, guys, it would be unreasonable for him not to get
Yeah.
it. So they forced.
I
his
mean, we have
hand.
to have an informed discussion. Like, otherwise, we're both gonna be like, "Yeah, it looks bad." Like, if someone actually has it,
I don't
and
actually.
Assassin's Creed Shadows will support it. It's gonna.
Oh yeah.
I
See,
don't know what's
better
gonna,
coverage.
I mean, I played Valhalla. I'm not gonna say how many hours, but that already should make it worth it.
How many hours? Yes.
Yes.
I see people saying Luke should just buy it for Jor and save him some money. I don't actually know if that works. Like if you buy a US console, if it works in another country. I don't actually know.
I think no.
'Cause I know
PlayStation.
electrical standards are different, but you could get an inverter and like, you know,
Oh yeah.
plug
I mean,
convert it,
you can
but-
just unplug the like a different cable. Like I think that should work. Right.
I just know they sometimes have like region locking stuff. You know?
Yeah, I mean that's only for accounts because I can make a US account and then I would still be in the US store. We sometimes do that for New Zealand and then live in the future.
Interesting. Oh, I am Hist says
I got a piece. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a PS5 from the US. Okay, so maybe it does work. Who knew? Who knew? Yeah, I've never tried it, but yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I'm in Brazil and I got the European PS5. You probably saved a lot of money doing that for real. Brazil's hardware stuff is insane. I had somebody like break it down for me. I was like, Jesus Christ almighty. Okay, let's catch up on super chats real quick and then we'll transition into our next little topic here. 53 Nights, thank you for that super chat, says, I stand with Jor against anime weeb shiz.
Very good. We need more in the army. We can recruit everyone.
It's about time we stood up. Enough of this.
We currently have 50 signatures to cancel the Dragon Ball release.
You're on your way? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, we'll get there.
Yeah.
Yep. Diego, thank you for that super chat. I'm amazed that Sony didn't give a sneak peek or announce new games with the PS5 Pro. Does that mean the PlayStation drought will continue for a while? This is what Jor touched on earlier. I mean, the rumors are swirling that there is a state of play like next week. And if that is the case, you have to wonder, why didn't they just combine the two events, show the PS5 at the end of that event, and be like, all the games we showed today will be enhanced for PS5 Pro or whatever? Like, why didn't they just do that? I would guess it's because some of the games they're going to show are not enhanced for PS5 Pro, at least not at launch. So they don't want to have that elephant in the room, but I'd say it still will be. So I don't really know. Allegedly, they're showing stuff off next week, though.
The pre-order, usually what Sony does is the pre-order is the week after they announce something. That has been the case for all the games. Like for the collector's editions, for like their biggest titles like Spider-Man and Horizon. But also for Concord and Astrobot. We did not know the price for Concord, remember, when it was revealed. And then I think a week later they announced it. But this is 2 weeks later. So I think that's because of the state of play that they have next week. And then for some reason they're giving people another week. It's actually when Tokyo Game Show starts, so maybe that has something to do with it. But
it might be one of those things where like in a month we look back on this and we're like, I don't know why they did it that way, but there are games. They just announced it.
Yeah,
maybe that's.
I mean, it's not because one of the reasons I could see is them like looking at, okay, what if we do the bare minimum? Let's see what the pre-orders will be. But then why not open them like today or like a week later, right? So I do think they're waiting for some things, or maybe the trailer wasn't ready, or there's so many things behind the scenes that we don't know why they did it like this. But yeah, right now we are talking about PS5 Pro for this whole week. And then next week we might talk about their games. So on one end, it makes kind of sense as well for them.
Yeah, there's something just weird with it. Maybe it's just that they're doing it in a weird order, weird way, whatever. And in a week, we're going to be like, yeah, this is way better and more compelling than you made it sound. Why didn't you just show us games?
We like, they know something that we don't know. And like, that is like the whole thing with everything, like with all the gaming podcasts, with everything that we're doing right now. It won't matter when GTA comes out. If they have a higher frame rate mode for that game, then all the talks we are having now don't matter, because then that console will sell like crazy.
Yeah.
Then if that's like the best way to play that game.
Well, and it's following that vein, something we talked about on stream earlier. Maybe part of the strategy with this is to just get the initial wave of scalpers and people that sell it out immediately and rush the stores. Maybe get that out of the way now, build up inventory, and then by next fall, you have millions and millions of back inventory.
You want to have it ready.
Exactly. So even though right now it's a weird look to announce it with basically nothing to really sell it, maybe it's just a sort of preparatory measure, if that's a word.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah, it would not make sense for them to leave it on the shelf until next year, till they had a game, right? Like, why not launch it now, get some money, see if people eat it for this price. Maybe they can like adjust the price if they really are not selling anything. Like, they will have a lot of data come end of this year, so.
Samaya, thank you for that super chat. I have an RTX 4080, but Sony has convinced me to sell my PC and buy a PS5 Pro. Now I can finally play Dragon Ball Sparking Zero in crisp and smooth 4K 60 while supporting the Japanese. Good for you, my friend.
Yeah, very good.
Very good. That's the only rational choice. And then Brown Boy Gaming, thank you for the $5. I'm going to buy a PS5 Pro just for GTA 6 and for a PC to be as good as PS5 Pro. It will be at least $1,000, and GTA won't be out on PC at launch. Yeah, I think a lot of people right now are just dismissing the potency of a big game like that to sell this. But my point is that the PS5 Pro makes sense if it's the definitive way to play GTA 6. I agree. That's a year from now.
And we don't know if it's going to be.
Yeah.
If it's just like, oh, the trees look prettier, like that's not going to help.
And there might not even be any actual like enhancement. They might just be like, nope, we've enhanced it for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S.
No. Sony is going to like knock on their door every day.
I think so, but like, if anybody can just be like, chill out, we're doing our own thing, we'll add support later. You know, it's Rockstar. Didn't they do something like that with the PS4 Pro for Red Dead? Wasn't there some weird, like it took a while for it to be enhanced?
I don't know. I mean, that game is still 30 FPS on PS5, so
yeah, just check the boards up.
That would be crazy if that game is 60 on PS5 Pro, by the way, Red Dead Redemption 2, but I think they locked it. It's not like uncapped, so.
Yeah. I mean, that alone would be a big selling point because Red Dead's great. And then, okay, we're all caught up there. Let me double check on Twitch real quick. Lots of follows. Thank you to all the new followers, by the way. Okay, let's talk about an implosion. Ubisoft has had
difficult times.
They've had a rough go of it for a while.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah, they just have.
Did you know did you hear the latest UK figures for Outlaws?
No, I did not actually.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting. Christopher Dring, who's getting more and more in the spotlight because he has sources in the gaming industry. Works for gamingindustry.biz. I think overall gamingindustry.biz does fantastic work. Like because we're like very in the know, of course, for things as well. I'm always interested to hear what other people have to say, but they always have this sort of interesting, more business developer angle that I appreciate, like on their podcast and stuff. So I thought that was very interesting. But yeah, they have like a lot of like data that they can look at in terms of sales in Europe, in particular the UK. And he says Star Wars Outlaws UK figures were lower than I expected. Digital and physical data via the GSD, but it did a very bit more than Avatar, 52% in the first week. Is this
okay?
But about half of Assassin's Creed Mirage. Plenty of opportunity to drive more units on this one as we head into Q4. Remember Mirage, the $50 Valhalla DLC turned into a real game. Made in 2.5 years. Sold 50% more than Star Wars Outlaws, an open world Star Wars game with probably 3-4 times the budget.
It just seems like every time we look at this stuff, it verifies that smaller budgets that are more like smaller teams, smaller budgets, more focused, tighter scope are just the way to go. Like it used to be that if you spend twice as much money, you will sell 2 to 3 times as many copies. That's just not a given anymore.
No.
I mean,
It's more risk, actually. I mean, the ceiling is not as low as a Mirage, but I think Mirage probably made its money back in a week because they didn't spend a lot. Like, they made everything with Valhalla already. While Star Wars Outlaws, they had to, of course, they used, like, you see some Division elements for sure, but they had to make a lot of like Star Wars assets, etc., etc. So that game costs way more to make. But yeah, this is not good. This is not good, and I mean, it in terms of physical sales, it looked like closer to Avatar actually, and that's crazy. Like, I think we all thought Star Wars Outlaws was gonna outsell Avatar way more, and it's actually pretty close to that, which is kind of wild.
I think there's just an overwhelming lack of confidence in not just like from an investor perspective, which we'll touch on in a second, but from a consumer perspective. There is an overwhelming lack of confidence in Ubisoft's ability to provide consistently high quality experiences. And then also, and perhaps more pressingly on their stock and on their sales, Ubisoft is known for the opposite of what Nintendo does, right? Nintendo, they release a game at 60, 70 bucks and it stays there forever. For the next 5, 6, 7 years, unless it's a very special occasion, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, it's going to be full price. Mario Tennis, full price. Mario Party, full price. No matter where you look. For Ubisoft, that a matter of weeks, max a month or two after launch, that game is going 30, 40, 50% off. Because they do that to boost sales and get more money flowing in. It's just what Ubisoft does. But because now everybody knows that they do that, tons of people... And I saw it in my chat and in my review comment section and everything. A lot of people were like, yeah, looks fine, looks interesting, and I'm excited to try it out. But I'm going to wait till I can get it on deep sale, like Black Friday-ish. And I think that is just an approach a lot of people take with Ubisoft that they can justify taking because there's not a lot of FOMO with Ubisoft games. There's not a lot of social pressure to play them. And, unlike a Helldivers where everybody's playing it. You got to get in. You got to play it right now. It's great.
And Shadows will have more of that as well, also because there won't be a lot of other things coming out around that time. And Assassin's Creed still has that cachet in a bit, and those games don't go as into a discount as fast as the other Ubisoft titles.
Yeah, but I think that is something to factor in, that they have this perception that you can just wait a little bit and it'll go on a deep sale. And because of that, a lot of gamers are just sitting on the sidelines. And it launched when there were other big games coming out, like, Black Myth was right around the same time.
Yeah, that hurt them for sure.
So they just sat on the side. So there's that. So that's a pressure.
And it's like a vicious cycle because you can't get out of that. Because they can be like, okay, let's now not put it on sale because everyone expects us to. But then people are not buying it full price. So, like, they have to put it on sale because that's the only, like, logical way forward for them. So then everyone's like, see, here we go again. So I don't know how to get out of that unless they, like, I really think if, and it always comes back to quality. If this was a 8.5 and everyone was still talking about it because I hear no one talk about this game anymore, I do think that would push more people. Like, I think always with Ubisoft games, even if you have like way more this year, and that has been in all corners of the internet. It's especially focused on on our gaming bubble. Like, you see it a lot. Like, there's always a hate train going, and they always have a next target, and they go. I still think a lot of people want to like a Ubisoft game because the promise of an open world Star Wars game is always great, but still right now Ubisoft cannot convince those people that it's worth it. And then they are once again confirm the feeling that everyone already has, where it's like, yeah, it's a 7. And that's kind of what Outlaws is. And they have to prove people again, no, we can make these higher quality games. But yeah, that's just somehow still hard for them to do this generation. Although, to be fair, and that's what's interesting, like, if we look at the same time in the previous generation, they had hit after hit. But yeah, then we're talking about Watch Dogs 1. That also was a 7. We talk about Ghost Recon Wildlands, which I think also was in the 7. Watch Dogs 2 was maybe around an 8. But those games also, did not reach like the 8, 8.5 range. Still sold way better. So they still had something happening. And maybe, because maybe over the years, because they did not improve themselves enough, they used the same formula. Everyone, like, you just know what you can expect when you boot up a Ubisoft game. And like we said many times during the podcast, people want new experiences, and Ubisoft is just afraid to provide that.
Yeah. I real quick, because we're about to get into the discussion of the stock price as well, because there's something really, I think, profound happening right now. Nova Solaqua gave a $5 super chat, very generous, thank you. Ubisoft currently at $12.10 USD, and GME or GameStop is at 20. It's time for a second go round the diamond hands. Yeah, I do see what you're saying, but it is important, just, and I'm not saying you misunderstand this, Nova, but I've heard people misunderstand this, so I want to be clear. Stock price does not directly correlate to company value. It depends on the number of shares outstanding. It depends on what class of stock they are, because there's many companies, most companies have different tiers of stock. There's preferred shares, there's public shares, common shares, ABC tier shares, and they all have different consequences, whether it's dividends or selling priority, whatever else. But having said that, like, you can look at something like Berkshire Hathaway, for example, which is a huge conglomerate, owns tons of different companies run by Warren Buffett. A-class shares of Berkshire Hathaway trade for $680,000. Does that mean that their company is worth, however many thousands of times more than Tesla? No, it's because there's not that many shares outstanding. So when it's all factored in, it actually comes out to a net worth market cap of about just under $1 trillion. But that does not mean that it's way disproportionately more valuable just because the individual stock is worth more. Having said that, though, with Ubisoft, what's happening is pretty interesting. If we go to just the one day, I'm in the US, full disclosure, so everybody understands, no shocker there. In the US, stocks like Ubisoft are traded based on what are called ADRs, or American Depository Receipts. It's basically just an ability for you to buy a thing that is paired to a share somewhere else. So you can buy a foreign company or a company that's traded on a foreign exchange without having to be a member of that exchange or trade on that exchange. So in this case, you'll see up at the very top, for people listening at home, I just have the finance sheet pulled up for Ubisoft Entertainment SA. This is traded in Paris, and it's a delayed quote, which means that they update it at a delayed period. Usually they'll update it at the end of business so that we can see in the States where it's at. In the last day, they've dropped 9% since those numbers came out of the UK. In the last 5 days, they're down 22%. In the last 3 months, they're down 48%. And if we go year to date, it's about 48%. If we go the last year, they're down about 56%. 5 years, they're down about 83%. The current target, what most companies and analysts guesstimate Ubisoft is worth, is about $30 a share, based on assets, based on revenue numbers, that type of thing. So if you see a gap of about 65-70%, you have to wonder, okay, well, what's the gap? If analysts think that this should be 30, but it's trading at 12, that should tell you there is some huge problem that they've identified that basically discounts the company by that amount, by that difference. It's why people point out that, like, Southwest Airlines in the US trades for pretty much exactly what they consider their assets to be worth. When you add up all their planes, everything else, they're worth X number of dollars. And that's about exactly where they trade at. And that's because investors don't consider there to be any added value in the management, in the employees, in the brand, nothing. That's how lacking in confidence they are. With Ubisoft, investors are so, I think, so frustrated with management within Ubisoft that they will pay basically 33 cents on the dollar for what Ubisoft is selling because they lack confidence in the leadership that much. They're so confident that Yves is going to consistently screw things up that they don't want to own something because they aren't confident that him and his management team can deliver on what their company should be capable of delivering on. So, like, I'll tell you right now, if Yves Guillemot and the Guillemot family announced that they were leaving the company, they were selling to somebody else and new managers would be brought in, this would skyrocket. This would blow up because this is a result of frustrations with their ability to deliver on what they should be able to deliver with the number of employees, with the infrastructure, with the technology they have. So clearly, like, Ubisoft is sick right now, and the whole promise for the last 5 years was that Yves Guillemot was going to be able to dig them out of this hole they had made where consumers were starting to lose confidence in their ability to provide quality content. Consumers were just frustrated with what they were doing in terms of the IP, the destruction of the Tom Clancy brand, all these different things they were doing. And Yves was like, just wait, I will prove to you we can do it. And now they basically have wasted years.
To be fair, and that's of course like always the thing, like their last big success was Valhalla. That game made $1 billion 4 years ago. And like, of course, when you make decisions in a big company like this, it takes many years to see them come to fruition. And
like 3 or 4?
I mean, like, one of the things they have been, I mean, I agree, but we of course had COVID, and especially for a big company like Ubisoft, that was like a big thing that delayed everything. I'm not like trying to defend them, I'm just giving some extra context.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like, one of their bets was free to play. Remember when there was a running gag where it was like, another Ubisoft Battle Royale is out, and they tried the Apex Legends thing with Hyperscape. That did not work. Like, they lack the talent, or something is missing. Why can EA Respawn pull it off, but Ubisoft, with maybe even more people working on Hyperscape because of the amount of studios they have, could not get the same lighting in the bottom moment. They were of course later as well, and that is crucial. We know timing in the live service space is very, very important. So one of their big bets was free to play. They had the Division Heartland. They canceled that outright. It was in development for 5 years or something. X-Defiant is finally out. It's struggling big time. Okay, free to play, not working. That's, yeah, they just, and that's crazy to me that, I mean, they spent billions on that, but they have not like released a successful free to play game, which is crazy. And mobile is another thing they're investing in, but they once again delayed Rainbow Six Mobile and Division Mobile till like later in 2025. So we would still have to see how that's gonna work. But that's what happened with Division Heartlands and X-Defiant as well. They kept delaying those games to be ready, and then they were already too late when they wanted to pull the trigger. Another thing they wanted to do, and that's what we still have not seen, is make a way bigger deal about their biggest franchises. So they were like, okay, we have these huge, because that's, I think, where Ubisoft is still very, very interesting also for potential buyers and for the industry in general. If you look at EA, their biggest game is like a FIFA game. And I mean, now they kind of have their own thing going, but like they also made, of course, they have like a lot of licensed games. In terms of IP, okay, maybe EA is not the best example because they, of course, have Battlefield, and but like a lot of the Take-Two, for example, the NBA, like Ubisoft owns a lot of their own properties, and that's like very, nice in this day and age to have your own IP. And right now they're all at like an all-time low, apart from Rainbow Six Siege. Like if Rainbow Six Siege wasn't there, they would be like, it would be
there'd be no money. They could actually legitimately go bankrupt.
Yeah, and that's why all these companies want a live service game, because what you normally have is you launch a game in one quarter and then you only make money in that quarter, and then the other types are like, what the heck? And with a live service game, you have multiple seasons in one quarter, so every quarter you at least have hopefully some profit. But like another bet they made is, okay, let's invest way more in the biggest franchise we have. And we are going to see that this year with Assassin's Creed Shadows and the Animus Hub. Like, that's their idea. That, okay, we, instead of launching a new Assassin's Creed game every year, like a big similar type of game, let's release this RPG, have this sort of hop around, kind of the Call of Duty model, right? Where they have Warzone, they have the zombie mode, they have multiple experiences in that franchise. And yeah, they're gonna try that and see if that's gonna work. And we still have not seen that. And to be fair, when Shadows comes out, we will not have seen if that works, because that's like a multi-year plan to, yeah, get more Assassin's Creed content out there that hopefully will make them make money. Because another thing that is next to Rainbow Six keeping them afloat is the back catalog of all these Assassin's Creed games that people keep playing and keep buying, and that they get money from Game Pass and PlayStation Plus. Like, that's also something that just keeps happening. Far Cry, they want to do something big with that as well. Ghost Recon is absent. They got Splinter Cell. Like, they're sitting on so many assets, and they have been making in the last few years so many bets on these franchises that we just haven't seen yet.
Mhm.
And to be fair, I am not convinced at all that they're going to work, because we had Breakpoint. They had something big with Wildlands. Then they launched Breakpoint, and that was like, how can you ruin your franchise with one game? Like, that was a really, really poor way to do that. And why would it be different this time, right? Far Cry 6 was not as big as Far Cry 5. Far Cry 5 was huge. 500 million units, or $500 million they made, I think, in a few days. It's crazy. That was like one of their biggest launches ever. And so they still had something there. And I just haven't seen in the last few years that they still got that they still can make people excited again about their games. But I do feel, and it's kind of like, sure, another bet they had, Disney, did not pay off. Like, again, Star Wars Outlaws selling half than Mirage in the UK. Mirage sold maybe 5 million units.
Yeah,
in total.
which, I mean, where I don't know where that number specifically breaks out is, like, I imagine the Star Wars IP is bigger in some areas of the world compared to others. And I think,
maybe in the US, yeah.
I think they were reliant a lot on the IP to carry some of the initial wave of excitement, whereas core gamers were probably more inclined to wait for a sale. But clearly, I mean, demonstrably, it did not perform as well as you would have thought.
And they need to pay Disney 30% probably. So is that game going to make a profit? If it is, it's not going to be worth the amount of time that Massive could have spent on a game that they did own, and that they maybe a Division 3 that they could have been released right now with like post-launch stuff, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So like, I just want, like, my point is basically, I think right now what we're seeing is like a reaction to it totally makes sense, because some of their bets have not been paying off, but we still have not seen the quote-unquote master plan yet for what they have in store for their biggest franchises. And to be fair, I'm also not convinced that that's gonna work out, because why would that work if they haven't really given any confidence? To be fair though, the Assassin's Creed series, like Valhalla, I mean, say what you want, like, people, that's like a very divided, a lot of people liked it, a lot of people did not. Still made a ton of money. That game has been played by like 30 million people. Like, that's huge. And I like what we heard about the sort of promise that they had, and the people that are working on it now, and them giving these developers way more time instead of releasing a new Assassin's Creed because their stock is like super low, like they have to hit the panic button or something. I still think that their approach on paper is good. We just have to see if they still got the stuff. But I do think, because that's another point that that we have from the Insider Gaming article, next year I really think it could flip really fast, because right now they have nothing. They have Rainbow Six Siege, but next year they will have Rainbow Six Siege as well. Next year they will have Shadows. Like, let's not forget how much money these microtransactions make in an Assassin's Creed game, and they haven't had that for the longest time, because the Valhalla post-launch was like over in 2022.
Mhm.
So they will have that in the background for Shadows. They will really support that a lot, at least according to what they said. So yeah, they will have Rainbow Six Siege and Assassin's Creed Shadows in the background, generating a lot of money for them already next year, something they don't have right now. Then they have a new Far Cry next year, Ghost Recon, Splinter Cell remake. We have rumors about a Assassin's Creed like PvP multiplayer game that they want to do. That's like, again, on paper should be great. I don't know how you can screw up the Splinter Cell remake. It's probably not going to set the world on fire, but you are probably going to make a profit on that.
Mhm.
And Far Cry and Ghost Recon are going to be very, very, very important to bring those series back to the forefront. So it's looking very dire right now. I think a lot of these right now, how 4 years ago when we heard Ubisoft's making the Star Wars game, that's like an easy win. This should be like a runaway success. How can they not hit a home run with this? I get it, but I still do think if next year we're in the same situation, Shadows didn't do as well, it was broken or whatever at launch, Far Cry, Ghost Recon is first person, people don't like it, Splinter Cell remake is not like we haven't seen a Ubisoft remake at all. Splinter, like we saw the Prince of Persia remake. I don't know. I hope it's not looking like that. So there are still a lot of question marks. I just want to say things can turn around real quick because right now they're very dire. They only have to have 2 hits and it looks different already. And Shadows pre-orders are looking strong according to Tom Henderson. So we will see.
I think Shadows... Star Wars is tricky because Star Wars is just... Disney has mismanaged the ever-living hell out of that IP. It really is a fascinating case study in how to screw up a very valuable franchise and just speedrun it. But as for Assassin's Creed, a lot of people that are online don't realize how big Assassin's Creed is. It is huge. I mean, you can flip it, depending on how you look at it, you could be like, wow, Star Wars Outlaws, a Star Wars open world game, sold half of what Mirage sold. Or you could flip it and be like, Mirage sold twice of what an open world Star Wars game would do. That's how big Assassin's Creed can be.
That's crazy. Yeah,
so it's all about framing. But with this, I do think that there's many different things that stack into this. You know, we've talked ad nauseum about the fumbles, the mistakes. Ubisoft has done a couple of things recently that has instilled some confidence. For example, Prince of Persia, earlier this year, a lot of people called it the best game Ubisoft's released in 5 years. It unironically could get nods for different awards at the Game Awards. It's very good.
That would be cool.
It's too bad that not many more people bought it and played it, but it is genuinely good. And if you haven't tried it, you should try it. It's on Steam now. It's genuinely very good. But then there's other, missteps they've taken in the last few years, like. This is still up. I'm not making this up. This is still up, an official website partnered to theirs. Ubisoft Quartz. I don't know if you guys remember this, but this was their whole abandoned project to integrate NFTs into all of their biggest IP. Their whole idea was that you buy things called digits, which were individual little like NFT skins and stuff. And the idea was that you could transfer skins across to other players, sell them to each other, or you could go and like when a new Ghost Recon game comes out, you could transfer your skins to the new game and all this. By some accounts, they spent over $100 million pursuing this, and it went nowhere. Total waste of money. So there's been some good things, and there's been some mistakes where it shows that they're maybe a little bit more desperate. What's happening right now is that investors have started to urge Ubisoft to sell the company either to somebody else, for the brothers that own it to own a good chunk of it, the Guillemot brothers, to go and buy out the rest of the investors so that it can go private, because they're not convinced that the stock slump is going to stop. Specifically, this is an article from the Wall Street Journal where they say Slovakia-based AJ Investments said it was unsatisfied with the current performance and strategic direction of the company. AJ Investments, a hedge fund based in Slovakia that holds less than 1% in Ubisoft, said in a letter to management that it was unsatisfied with the current performance and strategic direction of the company. Ubisoft has been facing a number of setbacks in recent months, no longer expects to release Rainbow Six Mobile, The Division Resurgence either until the end in the fiscal year to the end of March 2025, saying in July that the developers needed extra time to ensure the game meets players' expectations.
Yeah, we heard that before.
So Juraj Krupa, founder and chief executive of AJ Investments, said he wanted the letter to be a wake-up call for other investors. The hedge fund said that Ubisoft should go private and urged the founding Guillemot family not to block a sale process. It also called for the installment of a new chief executive willing to weigh the sale of some studios and lay off staff to cut costs. Here's good they mention it. Chief Executive Yves Guillemot led a battle nearly a decade ago, I believe it was 2014, late 2014, to fend off a takeover attempt by French media conglomerate Vivendi. The Guillemot family wields a stake of more than 13% in the group, according to FactSet, more than any other shareholder. Chinese internet giant Tencent Holdings in 2022 moved to acquire a minority stake in the family holding, though it didn't get any board seats or veto rights as part of that deal. Basically, what they did is they created a separate company that was like Guillemot Family Holdings or whatever, and then the Guillemot family owns half of that, and then Tencent owns the other half, and then that company owns the shares, the 13% in Ubisoft. So Tencent gets paid out on any revenues and profits and stuff, but they don't have any like verbal say in voting or anything. Honestly, kind of a weird deal. I can't think of another time that type of thing has happened in the gaming industry. It happens a lot in like high cash flow industries like insurance or banking and stuff, where you'll see investors do that, where they just want a little piece of the pie but don't want any responsibility. But it's rare in the gaming industry and the tech sector. Beyond that, I mean, it's basically some investors are calling for them to try and sell the company, but the Guillemot brothers treat it as a family business. A lot of the management are members of the family, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews. And as a result of that, like, to cut the Guillemot family out of the company is a lot more complicated than it sounds. But a lot of investors feel that that's what's necessary for a new direction. And I don't really know. I mean, I would not put money on that happening, frankly.
No, again, I mean, they own less than 1%. This kind of feels like an investor firm going rogue and getting a lot of attention for that, and totally rightfully so. And it's totally right. Like, again, if you look at what they released this year, it was all a failure. Skull and Bones, X Defiant, Star Wars Outlaws. So I totally get where they're coming from. But if they did not have a new Assassin's Creed at the end of the year, like then it would look, if they didn't have like a big lineup of games that are gonna come out soon, it would look way worse.
I mean, to be clear, investors have been asking for like the last 3 years at investor calls and earnings calls that when they do the little Q&A thing at the very end, like investors have asked about potential buyouts, and part of that's just the pressure of Xbox being willing to spend billions
it was like
on acquisitions. But
that's kind of over right now.
Yeah, I think for the immediate term, but also for another company to come in and look at throwing money at them. Ubisoft represents a very highly discounted product right now if
it gets so many
the
people.
family is willing to do it, which I don't think they are. So I think it's kind of an
they have like 20,000 people or something.
They have 20,000 employees, and they generate
that's crazy.
Less
if
revenue.
Someone is gonna buy them, it's gonna like be cut in half or more. Like it's gonna be crazy. They're gonna look at the crew, as some people in the chat saying that as well. Oh, it's getting an offline, but the crew makes a few $1 million. Let's cut that. All the others, like they're just gonna keep the Assassin's Creed studios. Maybe see if the Far Cry team does something cool, and Rainbow Six Siege, and that's it.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I've talked about this for years because I've seen investors talk about it for years. The amount of like the size of Ubisoft is on the scale of a company like you would expect who is running 3 or 4 Call of Duty level games. I mean, you would expect with the number of employees and teams they have, they would be pumping out like ridiculous multi-billion-dollar projects regularly. But,
I mean, they're gonna next year, but
if they actually get
and
across
they
the
have like
finish line,
10 Assassin's Creed games in development. But yeah, who's asking for that? One, by the way, interesting thing that Stephen Totillo said about this investment firm that is like calling Ubisoft out. They also wanted them to bring Watch Dogs back. There's like one fan that like, what is? To be fair though, and that's what I said on Twitter as well, and I'm curious to hear what you think about it. What if Outlaws was a Watch Dogs game? I think it would have done better. If they launched a new Watch Dogs game.
I mean, it probably would be more profitable, honestly.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Disney.
That's an interesting thought, I think, because obviously it's way more complicated than that. You would have massive making a Watch Dogs game. I don't think that could actually be pretty cool. They would have at least have owned it and not do like a crazy sort of innovative. Just make a centered around the character, like bring like do a mafia type Watch Dogs game. I think that would actually work pretty well, but of course easier said than done. But yeah, this Disney, they're not gonna work with Disney anymore. I think that's a closed chapter.
Yeah.
After Outlaws.
What did they say about Avatar? I'm trying to remember when they said they started working on Avatar. It was like 7-8 years before. I think it was like 2016, 17. Yeah. And I think Star Wars Outlaws was probably a similar period. So I think it was like they decided to partner up on that. They're like, oh, a big Star Wars game, big Avatar game. These are going to pop off. And I think it's just an artifact of its time. Now, almost a decade later, it's like, no, don't want to bother with that. Making a Star Wars themed game might actually be more of a detriment than just doing a generic like original IP space game.
We by the way have the PlayStation Store August top downloads. So yeah, we were like, oh, Star Wars, it should be doing better in the US, right? They don't share numbers, but it is very interesting. So in the US, the top selling game was Black Myth Wukong, of course. EA Sports Madden. Does Madden launch in August? Probably. EA Sports College was up number 3. GTA 5.
Of course.
Number 4. Star Wars Outlaws. Rainbow Six Siege was 1 under Outlaws. Rainbow Six Siege sold more almost than their new game.
Wow.
In the US.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, Rainbow's blowing up even more.
Then you're looking at it like, what are these people doing for 4 years? If this old game is that we released in 2016.
That's the thing, though, is it's like every time they're like, well, just make another Rainbow. And then you just get games like, Concord and Fair Games where they're trying again. But it feels like
they want it.
95% of the time it's going to flop. And you just have to hope you get lucky.
I mean, people are saying, of course, Rainbow Six Siege is cheap and GTA 5 as well. But still, our Outlaws easily cost 200 million to make, and with the marketing they spend a lot on that as well. To not outsell GTA 5, like that game we know sells like 2 million a quarter or something, or 3 million, like $1 million a quarter for Take-Two, because every time they report the numbers it's like 3 on top of it, or so they probably sold on the PlayStation Store not even 1 million copies of Outlaws.
Yeah. Crazy. I mean, it's like we've said for a long time, I think it's going to be a slow burn, but
I do think it will have like a nice boost again in they already have it planned. The
long tail
is going to go live.
Yeah.
In November.
So anyway, there's a lot of drama with it. We'll continue following it. I think Ubisoft desperately needs something to make them Ubi hard, and
they're going to announce Far Cry at the Game Awards. Lock it in.
Really? You think so?
I mean, they're gonna announce one of these games at the Game Awards. They have to be like, let's change things up. Maybe they're gonna do like an Animus Hub for the Assassin's Creed Infinity thing. They're gonna do a show and they're like, let's go crazy. Let's be like, this is the whole plan. Next year you get this. 2026 you get Hexay. And then also a new chapter for this. So that we can I do think that will make investors excited to show them like, and Shadows is just the start. We will have new Assassin's Creed content every year.
See, but
I
I'm
mean-
braced the second that they do a deep dive on the Animus Hub thing. I think the internet's gonna melt and they're gonna
Battle Pass.
yeah, they're gonna be like, oh, so you can sell us 5 different battle passes at the same time. And to be fair to everybody, to be very clear, we don't know what it looks like. There was reporting, I believe it was from Tom Henderson, where he was saying how what they had seen at the time was like battle passes layered in, and then the smaller contract style battle passes or whatever. So that could have changed by now. It could be different. But let's be perfectly honest. The whole purpose of the Animus Hub is to make Assassin's Creed into a hybrid with live service. And it could end up being good, but I've yet to hear a pitch as to why that makes the player's experience better. Every time I hear it, it's just, well, so like then you could buy the battle pass and then get more skins, or you can buy them through the shop and play them and use them in other games.
It's not gonna be for you. It's not gonna be for you.
It's true. That's true.
But that's why they might. Maybe it's smart to not talk about it before launch. To do like a season 1 launch, January 2025. Let it breathe. I think that actually
would
be way smarter.
I think so. Because right now with Shadows already, it feels like there's so much baggage.
Yeah,
they
just need the money from the game. Nothing more. Maybe have a few Helix packs because you can get away with it, and then talk about the Battle Pass Season 1, January 2025.
Yeah, for the people that are still playing, that will do it. Because obviously, like a lot of people bashed and hated on Valhalla, but
didn't work.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of people still played that afterwards because they just went to where their community was and just kept doing what they were doing.
Again, my number of hours played has 3 zeros, so I mean, on my play, I don't believe it, but it says it.
Wow. That's.
But did you play the Forgotten Saga? That was awesome, like a roguelite mode. They had like mastery challenges where you could like, and then
I did try. I always just get ticked off with the
river race
difficulty scaling. I think the game is just way too easy. One of the DLCs was really good and challenging, but even when like in the settings they have the ability to set it to like. Enemies are scaled to 50 levels over you or whatever it is. It's been a while since.
It was still easy.
It still is too easy. So I think it
should be different in Shadows. Should be different.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be more Odyssey, which I'm down for because I like.
It's gonna be skill level. They said in interview with me that it was like if you're around the 2-3 levels, it should be like good, and otherwise it might get hard. That's crazy.
Interesting. Anyway, any other stuff you want to run through before we wrap it up?
I mean, we touched on Concord already. I think that's beating a dead horse, but yeah, it has of course been a very interesting story.
It's not even a dead horse anymore. It's gone. There's just no horse left.
They just made $0
beating the ground. Yeah,
they made.
I did get my refund. It fully processed.
Yeah?
Yeah. So
is it like a PlayStation Store currency thing? Or did you buy it on PC?
I got the actual money back on my card. So they didn't even do like the store credit. They actually gave me the money.
That's crazy. That's nice.
So
yeah, I'm bracing for Firewalk closing down messages anytime.
Do you
now.
I guess maybe we wrap up with that. Aftermath of Concord. Do you think they just try to do a free-to-play launch and just try again?
No.
Or do you think that they just can it? And following from that, do you think Firewalk is downsized or shut down?
I think they might extract some like people that they did like to like work at Bungie or at other studios. I mean, they did that as well with Deviation Games. That was like the Call of Duty Zombie veterans that they announced at the Summer Game Fest that they were working on a game with Sony. And then that studio suddenly shut down. But then Sony made a new team with a lot of talent from that studio. So they kind of handpicked the ones they liked. Would not be surprised if they do that here as well. But Firewalk is over. Like, how there's management there and there are directors there that have no place in this. Like, you cannot work on this game for that long and think that you have something.
Yeah.
when everyone could see that you did not.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be sad for many people who just did what they were told, like they were just working on the game that they enjoyed, and yeah, they could not make like high profile decisions, and they will likely get let go. But yeah, Concord is never gonna come back. Like that's, I mean, they even revoked the review copies. I really think they're gonna write it off. Like that's the only possible.
Even that though, I got contacted by a guy that does like corporate accounting and would be the guy that would do the book's work to write something like that off. And it was really interesting. You know, he gave me a lot of info on some other stuff too, but he was explaining how for something like this, it's not as simple as just the cost of Concord. When you factor everything in, the studio acquisition, the development cost for the last year since they've owned it, the marketing, all that, it's not as simple as just being like, that was 200 million and then we'll write that off this year. He was like, because most of the development costs were bundled into the acquisition cost last year when they bought the studio. It depends on how they financed it. You know, if they paid cash, if they compensated the investors with Sony stock, that could be different. Because that's what a lot of the time this is, where it's like, you know, you own Firewalk, or you and 5 other people own Firewalk. We'll give you 100 million worth of Sony shares in exchange for the company. They didn't technically spend 100 million on the company, but they issued shares or distributed shares that the company owned back to those investors. So it's not the same, like you can't write it off in the same way as if you swiped your card and spent that money. So he was like, it really depends on what they were doing. And he said, my feeling is based on just how confident they were with Concord. He's like, I wouldn't be surprised if they did not handle this in a way prepared to write everything off. It seems like they were so confident that they might have just set this up in a way where they issued shares of stock instead of doing like a financed leveraged buyout or something, which would have been probably smarter.
They're into they're still like in deep shit then, probably.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like no matter what, unless they were like hyper cautious about it, they're probably in deep shit. But you know, maybe they were hyper cautious, but I don't think if they were hyper cautious, they would have launched Concord the way that they did.
I mean, some other people's theory is as well that they weren't really confident in Concord anymore. I mean, Jim Ryan, of course, left earlier this year, but the game was just almost done. Like, if you compare the marketing from Astrobot with Concord, you do notice kind of a difference. So maybe they were like, maybe it can be another Helldivers 2 moment where we just launch it and it catches on and word of mouth, like it is a solid experience. We will see. But then, of course, quickly figured out it. Like, I would be shocked. And that's what you always hear. Like, I even heard, I'm not sure where I saw it, but there was like Redfall. There was like a Bethesda marketing person, maybe in a comment under one of your videos. I'm not sure where I saw it, but they were like, we got like a build for the game 3 months before launch, and it was broken as heck. Like they know, I mean, Concord was of course not broken in that way, but they saw the numbers. Like everyone saw the numbers. They opened up the beta in the first weekend for everyone, and then still nobody played it. So they must have known. So maybe they were, because of previous leadership that got also let go thanks to The Last of Us Online, which was of course another 3-year Naughty Dog wasted effort, that they put them also in this Concord decision. I think it's pretty clear that unless they have some things that we don't know about, that they are trying to make it work because they only see that, or maybe they will cut the studio in half, work on a free-to-play version, try and get, or like a complete package without any post-launch, have all the characters they were already working on launch at the same time. This is Concord. Have fun with it. There's an offline mode for, I don't know, bots or something, and hopefully sell it like that. But there's no world, I think, where it's gonna work. So yeah, I think them handpicking and then moving to another studio makes more sense. But I think it's more interesting what's gonna happen to Fair Games or to their other live service games, because that also sounds like something that the people that fought Concord were a thing made as well. And I saw from Kyle Bossman his video, he looked at I don't think it was like at like the what was the show that they have the game GDC. It wasn't there, but somewhere else, where the pitch for Fair Games was more about the cloud technology that Haven has. That's of course one of the things they said, right? That they were like they are super far ahead with like cloud development, which works really well in during COVID because everyone's working from home. And one of the key features they had for Fair Games was we can, with very little work, make masks for our characters, and those are gonna be super cheap to make. Blah blah blah. Maybe that was like Jim Ryan or other like suits looking at that, being like, "Whoa, that's a ton of like easy money, right?" So it seems like maybe Fair Games was also bought in to with the wrong intentions instead of, hey, let's make a fun game. So I'm just mostly curious about what's going to happen to that team.
I have a sinking suspicion that we're going to see Fair Games at whatever this state of play, whatever
Really?
it is. I think so. I it's just a gut feeling, to be perfectly fair, but like after they pull Concord fully from store shelves and take it from everybody's libraries and send out refunds, there's a story that drops where insiders within PlayStation are talking to journalists and saying that they are very confident in Fair Games and that Concord hasn't affected it and stuff. And
I don't think they said that Concord hasn't affected. I think
their confidence in Fair Games.
I think the journalists heard from Sony people that they were confident in Fair Games.
Yeah. And so like it seems to me like this is maybe going to change how they price it. I think this Concord makes it much more likely that they announce it from day one as free to play and go in there. But I really have a feeling that they're going to try to just send it out there. But I mean, we saw the trailer, like at least for Concord, people were like, I don't really understand what this is, but okay. I'll wait till you show me more. But with the Fair Games cinematic trailer, universally negative feedback. People are just like, I'm already cringing, you know? And maybe they can adjust it, maybe they can address the tone, but it really does come off as like, honestly, a Ubisoft live service title, which is why one of the top comments on that video on the trailer is you can take the devs out of Ubisoft, you can't take the Ubisoft out of the devs, because it really does look like it, you know?
Love that one. By the way, I see some people ask like cloud development. Like Haven Studio has been a cloud native studio from day one. So they're like talking about that in a blog post here, where they're kind of like had a great vision and passion to push game development into the future using the potential of the cloud. Cloud development created a lot of. The cloud is an incredible accelerator and delivers opportunities to move faster and co-create better. You already see this in other industries, like how Figma and Google Docs fundamentally change how work is done. Games need to start moving in that direction.
Yeah, we want a truly native cloud engine. If we were to remove the cloud part, it no longer exists or cease to make any sense. Think of Google Docs. It needs the cloud to function. To enable that for game development, we need to rethink engine design from the ground up and look to ways to leverage horizontal scalability, bandwidth availability, and connectivity for every single component. We are trying to build workflows that previously took several hours so that they now only take a few seconds. I mean, yeah, iteration time is key. Game development is all about iteration. Nothing is ever good enough in V1. Being able to quickly access all of your data without syncing massive files or fighting a slow internet connection will have enormous benefits to productivity. And so maybe the whole benefit of Haven is just the technology behind it. It's not even necessarily the game itself.
And that they had a studio in Canada, which was also something that Sony, of course, really wanted because there's a lot of talent there. I think they're in Montreal.
Yeah, they say, it seems specifically they're talking about tech pipelines, and a lot of people that worked at Google. They say, since we all left Google, I was watching the Haven team start on their amazing adventure as I assembled all of the best engineers to work on our vision for the future of games as a service technology. But we didn't have a game team. We didn't have collaborators on the content side to partner with. Now we have bridged that gap and we can make the best technology for the best development team. We are already helping to solve current problems and improve the game team's workflows with cloud-based solutions. Also, it's just great to be back together with our shared passion and vision for the future.
They,
So-
by the way, have 15 open careers. That's crazy. I mean, that game is they're gonna go crazy with that game.
I mean, they're betting a lot on it. And, I don't know what product development jobs.
Oh, it's a PvEVP game. Did you know that?
I mean, I
PvP.
got the vibe that they are going to have like guards within the towers and place
Vault.
where you do the
Yeah.
house or heists, and then you fight against other teams, which is where the PvP side of it comes in. But yeah, they're betting a lot on it. To catch up on our super chats real quick, let's see. Let's see. I read that one. Let's see. I read that one. Sumaya, Ubisoft used to make consistently good games in the mid 2010s. I'm not sure what happened over the years. Now, gameplay looks good to me, and I am huge into Japanese history and culture. Metacritic prediction for Shadows, mine is that it is less than Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Metacritic score.
Quickly searching the previous ones.
Yeah, I was like, I expect it to be about in line with Odyssey. I think it's going to be
really
about there. Yeah, it's like 82,
I think Odyssey
83.
is going to be better. I think Odyssey will have a better.
Oh, you think so? I'm optimistic that there's a lot they haven't shown us. If it really is just like big map, you go climb castles with two different characters, then yeah, I agree. It's going to be a lot less. But I'm hopeful that it's at least on the scale and scope of Odyssey, which had like faction systems and had a really robust role-playing system. I hope it's on that level, but if it's not, then yeah, I agree. It's going to be a good.
I think it's going to be similar to Valhalla, maybe like a 79.
79. I'll go. Well, there's also. Yeah, I mean it's going to be right around probably 80 plus or minus 5. I think.
I'm not convinced by the writing yet. I did some digging also at like the writers. Like they have a lot of like talented people on the gameplay side and stuff that have been with Quebec like for the longest time, like working on Syndicate and even before that when they were still like more of a sports studio. But the narrative team is almost completely new, and that's for a Ubisoft game not a good sign. And I think a lot of people like the Odyssey writing a lot.
I didn't know that they were doing that. Because in Odyssey, every single side quest had a story, and that was like their big push for that game was every side quest has a story. And
no, but yeah, the narrative director that worked on Odyssey is now the narrative director on the new BioShock game, and she left like after Odyssey, and that's what we all saw with Immortals, like kind of went downhill.
I mean, that's good to know in light of that, because Odyssey, like one of the main things that I appreciate about Odyssey is an example I use all the time when I talk about, which is one of the first things you do, one of the first quests in Odyssey is on the starter island, and there is a sickness, a plague going through one of the smaller villages on the outskirts of the island. And you can go there and you can choose either to let the guards kill off the last infected family, or you can step in, take out the guards, and then that family is allowed to live. If you allow the infected family to live, you don't know if they're infected or not at the time you make the choice, but if you make that choice and let them live, you leave, play the game for another 10, 20 hours. If you come back to that starter island, the entire island is covered in piles of dead bodies. They're burning them. Basically, the entire culture has been destroyed because the plague continued to spread, and that's your fault. And I love that. And if you choose to let them kill that family, the plague stops. That little girl is, upset that her friends were killed. But other than that, you avoided a catastrophe. And so if the team responsible for that, if the narrative team that made that type of thing happen is gone, that makes me much less confident.
I mean,
frankly.
There are a lot of people there. The key people that they have chosen, they just arrived at Ubisoft during the development of this game. And yeah, that's usually like, for example, the Valhalla, the writing wasn't amazing. Like you really saw a noticeable drop in some story arcs because it was made by a different studio. Like that's of course what they always do. Different regions are made by different teams. So we will have to wait and see. But that is where I'm like, so far also the dialogue that we have seen. We have not seen a lot. Wasn't great what we saw, right?
Yeah.
The Ubisoft Forward
the
stuff.
weird like stiff. I will go by the shadows.
Yeah,
go
like
by the sky or whatever. Like, it's,
yeah. It's like nobody says that.
like, okay, weirdo. That's not how people talk.
So yeah, I mean, and I see Marty here. This just lowered my expectations for Shadows. Good, because then hopefully, it exceeds our expectations. I mean, the stuff they're doing with their engine, though, I think that's like exciting. If that all works, we will. Yeah, it will actually feel once again like a more significant jump than what we had the previous games. So let's end it on that note.
Last super chat to hit real quick. Well, first, Nerbindo, I replied to your message. Thank you for the super chat. Just email me, luke@28thav.com, and we can talk. Thank you for that. And then, Joel, do you think physical media will go away completely? Yeah, that seems pretty clear that that's what they're pushing for. So, yeah, I think so. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, not maybe completely, but like the PS5 Pro not having a disc drive, that's a big
that
thing.
tells you
That's
where it's moving. Yeah, and
yeah,
Xbox
that's actually
is doing
where
the
they
same
want
thing.
you to. Yeah, where they want. I mean, they're getting like way more margin from just the digital store.
Yeah, they'll do stuff like
but,
I think they'll have a physical disc drive just because it helps. It's kind of like a get out of jail free card if they're ever sued for like monopolistic behavior. They're like, you can still technically buy it used through GameStop. You just have to buy this disc drive, which so far has held up in court. But
I don't think it will completely go away. Like there are still big games like FIFA and I mean GTA. Like if that was only a digital game, that would significantly hurt it, I think. But I think what Nintendo is gonna do is gonna be very interesting. If the Switch 2 has like a digital only version, then it's over.
Yeah.
Because Nintendo games are like, I mean, they are increasing the digital share, but they're like far behind. I think it's 60-40 or something still. Many people buy their games with the cartridge. So if they have a Switch 2 that is like digital only for $50 less or something, I do think that will accelerate things. Yeah.
But with that, guys, thank you so much for hanging with us. You guys are wonderful.
Yes.
Appreciate the gosh darn heck out of you guys. Thank you to all the wonderful super chats. Thank you to all that. Let me double check on Twitch. Thank you for all the new follows, guys. You guys are amazing. We'll be back probably next week.
No, it's about,
Maybe.
I mean, that's if you are here.
Yeah. I might have to do something. I don't know. Cozy, thank you for the 5 as well. Hey, Luke, first time donating, and I was wondering what you thought of Days Gone. I think Days Gone, the last half is pretty good. The first half is a real trudge, but the last half was a really good time. I think it's tragic that game is not ever going to get a sequel, and I think it's a mixture of critical reception, and then I think Sony also was frustrated that it seems like a lot of people who were in positions of leadership within Sony Bend started butting heads, to say the very least, with people within upper levels of PlayStation, like Herman Hulst. And as a result, they left. And now Bend Studio is allegedly working on, like, I don't know if they've confirmed it's a live service game or if it's just a new IP or whatever.
Yeah, they confirmed it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see it eventually. But they said it's going to utilize the technologies from Days Gone, but who knows? But I do like Days Gone. Yeah.
I looking back on it, like Days Gone would have been perfect in a year like this, where you don't have any other big AAA Sony games. But yeah, or IP.
RIP. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I love you all.
Yes,
we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Hugs and kisses. Bye bye.